Hi, and welcome to the HR and CQ Show podcast. Today we're going to talk about navigating cross-cultural teams. So as most of you know, Sarah and I host a number of events, HR and CQ Breakfast Bites, and also we've got the HR and CQ Show Summit. And at these events, we give you opportunities to ask us questions about the different topics that we discuss. And today we decided that we would cover the topic of navigating cross-cultural teams.
So this is a compilation of questions that have come up from the Breakfast Bites events that Emma's mentioned. And one of the resounding themes that came out is that what exactly affects a culture in a company? And we're talking about the cultural element, not organizational culture, right? Thank you. So, for example, as is often the case, we have leadership changes, we have CEO changes. What is it that makes that difference? What is it that affects the culture?
So each of us will have our own cultural values that are ingrained in us that stem from our upbringing, our caregivers, our educational system, and then also the intersection of our life experiences as well. And that then determines the way that we, communicate, we value time, or we build relationships, as just a couple of examples. But what happens is that those values don't necessarily stop at the front door when we go into the office, and then we just become just a blank canvas. Those behaviours actually come with us when we're in the workplace. But those values that we have could look very different to our colleagues or the team that we lead or our manager. And that's why we often, especially here within the UAE, where we are so multicultural, face so many challenges because there's this miscommunication, people questioning why people can't turn up to meetings on time, or people asking why no one's speaking up in their meetings. And all of that is to do with our individual cultures. So to your question of why then, if the leadership team changes, does that then change the culture within the organisation? That's ultimately because the expectations, assumptions and perceptions of the leader is all based on their cultural values. And so if that leader changes and the leader that's replacing them comes in from an entirely different cultural makeup, then their expectations, assumptions and perceptions are going to be entirely different. And so there could be, for example, underlying organisational values, and those values may stem even from, if the company's headquartered somewhere else, they may have then opened up a branch here within the UAE, and they bring with them then those organisational values, because they're the values that we have everywhere within our organisation. However, they may not be the values that you see within the organisation here within the UAE, because the organisation and the way that people behave within the organisation will be fully determined by their own cultural values, and that then determines their behaviour. So as an example, you might have a company that's headquartered in the UK or America, where typically, but not always, people have a much more collaborative approach, a much more flatter leadership style, where employees would feel a freedom to speak up and share their thoughts and ideas. However, it might be that the branch here within the UAE is being led by a group of leaders that come from more authority-orientated cultures, where there's an expectation that employees will respect the senior leadership, kind of take direction from them and not challenge their decision making. And so when you've got those things in place, it's quite an interesting dynamic in terms of what is the organisation's culture, because the two things are at play.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm smiling and laughing internally because I've seen so many, and we did briefly discuss this, I think, in our Christmas and end of year conversation around the toxic workplace.
Yeah.
And it's kind of coming back to that again, isn't it? It's those, and I'm going to use us Brits as an example, but us Brits coming over, taking a job with a company that's got British management, so they expect it to be the same, but they don't recognise that a Brit who's been in the region for a period of time, and I can use myself as an example here, my value around time management is very different to what it used to be in the UK, and it's very different to Emma's. I'm perpetually late for meetings with Emma because I need to plan myself better. But that's because my value has become more flexible.
Yeah. So one of the things that I often talk to, especially those that are working in like customer facing role, like sales orientated roles where they have to have regular meetings with clients, if they come in from more like structured time orientated cultures, and then they come to work in the UAE, they might think that they're going to be able to get through, like 8 meetings in a day. And I laugh because I'm like, or, if they've got like their senior leadership team coming in from America and they're wanting to meet, the key leaders within their, top 20% client base. And while they're on this visit, which is maybe 3 days to Dubai, they're expecting to see all of those, 15 customers over a 3-day period. It's just unrealistic to have that expectation, because the way that time's perceived differently here means that people don't turn up to meetings on the time that's suggested for the appointment necessarily. Some will, some won't. The length of that meeting will look different, even if you've put in the diary that the meeting's going to be 30 minutes or an hour. It's likely that that meeting will go on beyond that because of the fact that either somebody's not turned up to the appointment at the start time that's been scheduled, or that there needs to be that time allowed for that relationship building, which is really key in this region. Some meetings that take place, especially like in the kind of sales dynamic, are purely around relationship building rather than around like talking about the business itself, or is the client interested in wanting to pursue the product or services. And so there's a lot of time given for relationship building. So the meetings can go on way beyond the time that they were supposed to. And so trying to then cram in eight meetings in one day is just purely unrealistic.
Yeah, no. I have recollections of my father giving me the same advice many moons ago, and the one tip that he gave me was, if somebody offers you a drink or offers you tea, it's like they want to do regionally, they want to have a relationship with you, they want to do business. And this was then reinforced to me more recently by an Emirati that I was speaking to at a cultural event the year before last, who advised me that within the more traditional Bedouin tribes that there are, if somebody wants you to stay and sit, they'll only fill your cup halfway so that you can keep refilling it. If they want you to leave straight away and be done, they'll fill it to the top. And what was interesting about that was, he said the younger generations just aren't getting it. They don't understand, because they arrive and they get, well, why am I only getting a half cup? Why don't I get a full cup? So there's all of those generational cultural awareness and values that are being adjusted or lost or relearned as well, which is interesting. Sorry, that's a bit of an aside there, but it's relevant. So something else that we're looking at the moment and having to face since COVID more than anything is having remote teams. So people, or a company where the team is split between some in the UAE, maybe some in France or the UK or India or wherever it might be. How do you develop that cultural relationship there?
Yeah, so I think with any virtual meeting setup, there has become this nature of we just, we get onto that call and we get straight down to business, and then we cut the meeting and then we're done. But what that does is it avoids then that opportunity, or doesn't allow for, that opportunity for that relationship building that we've mentioned. And so the way the cohesion of the team is going to be limited, because people won't feel that element of trust with one another. So even if people are working remotely, one of the things that we definitely have to allow for is to create that space for relationship building and with that then comes trust and loyalty and that team ethics of actually just wanting to do a good job as a team and wanting to collectively come together to achieve whatever it is that we're set out to achieve. So if you're a leader of a multicultural team, I suppose my question would be to that leader, how have you made sure that your team have had an opportunity and time to build trust? And senior leaders, I often find, say, well, we haven't got time for that. We're like too busy to start giving people time to chat with one another. We just need to, we're paying people to do a job, just get on with it. And that, unfortunately, is a kind of a bit of a narrow view in terms of how do you get the team to work together effectively. I always kind of pitch it that it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain. So you may feel like you're losing time, precious time, where if you're giving the team time to kind of small talk with each other for half an hour before we actually get down to business. But you only need to do that for a period of time when you've brought the team together for there to be that feeling of, oh yeah, we're one team. I like this person. I trust them. We support the same football team, or we enjoy the same thing at the weekends, whatever that might be, so that they then feel like they can trust each other and they want to do a good job. And so you lose that time if that's your kind of angle in which you view it. You maybe lose that time up front, but the long-term gain is you have a much more effective, productive team who work well together.
I guess it's replacing those what you might call water cooler moments, or the lunch conversations and stuff that you just don't have. I've seen some companies that will do that. We'll say, right, we're going to have lunch together, and it's a remote lunch or a coffee break, so that everybody logs in and it is a coffee break. So you're not talking about a meeting, you're talking about each other, what you've been up to, the latest coffee machine or whatever it is, rather than sort of focusing on having a business meeting, and maintaining those conversations around and outside of other meetings then develops that cohesiveness.
Yeah, because if you think about when we were all in the office together, the amount of things that maybe got solutioned or decisions were made because you bumped into your colleague in the canteen, or as you say, next to the water cooler getting water, where you're just able to quickly bounce something off the other person, and quickly you can then get back to work because you've been given an answer or resolution or whatever it might be from that person. Those moments are now lost mostly when we work remotely. And so this time that you and I are suggesting or recommending that people schedule for this moments of relationship building also does give space for those things to happen as well. And you're not necessarily losing any more time than you were before, because people weren't chained to their desk before. People, when they'd, had enough of the thing that they were looking at, would have got up from their desk and would have gone and grabbed a coffee, or, gone and grabbed their lunch, just to get that kind of moment of downtime. And we're basically saying still give them that space, but do it in a more structured way.
Yeah, so we give that facilitation behind it.
Yeah.
So then if we think about, we've talked a little bit about the individual's values from a cultural perspective. In terms of cross-cultural communications, if we come on to that now, and I know we're kind of bouncing around, but this again is another query that's come in. So what's the most impactful initiative that you've seen that would improve cultural cross-cultural communications? And maybe we could look at it and say, because we appreciate not everybody has like the humongous budgets that we'd like them to have, but maybe you've got sort of a top and tail of a price scale that you could offer in terms of costs of impact of initiatives.
I think for me the biggest challenge is that organisations have not stopped for a moment to question why are they facing the communication challenges that they're facing. Most people have a really limited perspective of culture, which means that they don't put down their communication issues to cultural differences. So obviously I would say hire me if you want to see
That's a very good option.
if you want to see change, hire me. But yeah, recognise what is the demographic of people within your organisation. Is your leadership team a representative of that demographic, or are they from entirely different cultures? There, immediately you're going to see some challenge. Why you're seeing some of the challenges, and if those challenges are arising, when are they arising? Under what circumstances are they arising? Are they only arising in certain departments?
A certain time of year, like when it's budgeting season or something.
If you're a company that is carrying out things like employee net promoter scores, are you able to analyse the data from there to determine what is your employee network feeling and thinking when it comes to communication, and does that give you some kind of trends or some telltale signs about where the communication breakdown is occurring and what you can then do to alleviate that? But yeah, I think that where most companies fail is to recognise that miscommunications is culture.
Yeah, and I think one of the kind of easy introductions to that, let's say, is to actually do, when you consider the types of communication that you have the right methodology to elicit the responses, is to do a survey to do some research within your team about how they actually feel. Do they feel like they're being listened to? Do they feel like they can speak up? Do they feel like, these kind of questions that can come up? For me, that would be a quick and easy way to gather information, as well as you could analyse, I guess, performance reviews and any commentary and objectives that come out of those, and feedback that come.
Exit interview details, if you do exit interviews, but also thinking about taking a cross-section of how you're going to gather that data, because of the fact that some people won't feel comfortable with speaking up. Do you need to offer a few different methods in which you're going to use to gather that information? So you might choose to do surveys, you might choose to do employee focus groups. You might choose to take data from things like exit interviews, just so that you can get a real good overview, a full big picture of what's going on, rather than just if you only look at survey responses as an example, it might be that some employees don't feel the freedom to speak their mind, and so you're getting an unrealistic picture of what's going on within the organisation.
Yeah. And then obviously you mentioned your services as a cultural intelligence trainer, an expert and author. We can come in and have you and do one workshop for the senior leadership team, but then what?
Yeah, so to your point, you could have me come in and do training, but cultural intelligence is a developable skill. So a one-off session isn't necessarily going to change behaviour. What the training does is it gives people real food for thought about how they can change their behaviour. But it's down to the individuals to actually choose, right, now I've obtained that new information that I wasn't aware of, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to change my behaviour? Am I willing to change my behaviour? So one of the things that I was doing in all my training courses is ask delegates that attend the course to complete an action plan as we go through the content. What am I learning from the session? What do I want to start implementing? What might I want to consider implementing once I get back out to the workplace? And then with that action plan, I also make those decision makers that hire me aware that that's what I'm going to do. So then I say, look, one of the things that you can use this action plan for is to have really good performance conversations with your employees and say, okay, what did you learn from the session? How are you going to implement that? How can we hold you accountable to those behavioural changes? And get the leaders or their managers to set objectives around those specific things, so we can actually start to measure the behavioural changes that we're expecting to see, but also the ones that the individuals wanted to set for themselves as well. And that would be then where we see that level of accountability, and we will gradually over time see behavioural change. But, cultural intelligence is around people's behaviour, so it won't be an overnight change that a company would see.
It's not like a light switch that you can turn off.
I mean, for some people it might be, because through the conversations that we have, through the group discussions, or the case studies, we do have moments where people go, oh my goodness, like I didn't know that was how it was perceived by other people. And so people can have an immediate change of behaviour when they've had those moments. But it does mean that it's a conscious effort. You are actually consciously saying, okay, in these sort of circumstances, I want to adapt and flex my approach so that my behaviour is received better by others in the room. And you may not always need to apply that change because it depends on who's in the room. It's when your level of cultural intelligence becomes an applied skill that you do subconsciously that you've mastered it. And even as a cultural intelligence expert, I am not yet at that
still
stage.
Practicing.
I'm definitely going to put my hands up and say there's times when I absolutely still make those faux pas where, and that might be sometimes because you've never been with somebody from that particular culture, or you've made an assumption of somebody and then, you know, they might be from a particular country, you might go into the room expecting them to behave in a certain way, but then actually, you know, they were educated somewhere else. They have lived as a third culture kid in Dubai for the last 20 years. Like you, they've spent the last, 20, 30 years of their career overseas. So people don't necessarily always show up the way you expect them to, but it's about having that ability to flex and adapt.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I know that from talking with you over the last 3 years, I've learnt a lot about my own cultural behaviours as well as other people's, and can recognise them in other people's. I'm not so good at flexing them consciously or subconsciously rather. I do work to consciously flex them and just stop and think when I'm communicating with individuals, but also when I'm analysing responses from people. And oftentimes when I'm discussing situations with people, I will say, okay, let's put a cultural lens on this. What is that person's behaviour demonstrating to us? That might be why that this has come out this way, or why they've said that, or why this action has been taken or decision made. So I do sort of have that reflection, but it's something that you definitely have to work out. So you offer cultural coaching as well.
Yeah.
What does that look like as another option, as another layer of opportunity for change?
Yeah. Well, so we offer the training workshops, but aside from that, then there may be that, it doesn't necessarily have to stop there, because sometimes companies get a taste for cultural intelligence and then they think, like, what more can we do? How more can we support our employees? And so it might be that the coaching is a suitable option. And the reason why that's a good option for some is that the training workshop helps people to start to recognise their colleagues' behaviours in the room, because we have group discussions, we do case studies, but the coaching enables people to maybe ask questions that feel too sensitive to ask in the classroom setting, because sometimes people want to voice an opinion that they've got but are concerned with how that might be perceived by colleagues. Like, in fact, might somebody think that this is a racist opinion or view, and so they wouldn't necessarily feel the freedom to speak up and share those thoughts or ideas that they've got of a colleague. It might be because they can't talk about the scenario because the colleague's in the training room too. So they've got a specific challenge that they want to discuss with me, but they can't do it in the broader classroom environment. So the coaching helps to create that more one-to-one space, so a person can get very specific and individual kind of feedback and advice on how to handle certain cultural situations.
Okay, cool. And that, I guess, takes it from being embedding it into the process, embedding it into the environment of the business, rather than just making it a tick box exercise, which immediately adds value.
So I think also one of the things that you and I were talking about at the most recent HR and CQ Breakfast Bites event was ESG, and the S being the social element. I think that HR does have a responsibility to be thinking about how are we making sure that our cross-cultural teams are working effectively together. And one of those things, I suppose, is that so we also don't then end up hiring like a whole team of people that are from the same demographic, just because it makes life simple and they all get on with each other. So, you know, what kind of things do you think that the HR team should be thinking about when it comes to, you know, bringing on board a multicultural team? Because inevitably that is pretty much every team in the UAE. Most people are working cross-culturally rather than monoculturally.
I think there's a lot of teams that are working in what I'd classify as it's still a mixed culture, but I think there's pillars of culture, and there is a propensity in certain areas to hire people of the same ethnic diversity, and therefore to some degree cultural diversity as well, or demographic, within a team, because the language is the same, because the behaviours are the same, so we all kind of get it, and it means that things work well. Having diversity in those teams, however, would bring a different facet to the work that's being done. Different attitudes and behaviour and communication, absolutely, but also different levels of education, different ways of doing things, different ideas, different boxes to think outside of, right?
Well, the research...
problem-solving challenges, you know, all of these good stuff. Sorry, you said research.
I was going to say, the research shows that the more diversity that you have within the organisation, or within a team even, the greater level of creativity and innovation that you have, which ultimately drives an increase in productivity.
Yep, and then the increased productivity increases your bottom line as well. So then everybody's happy, including the finance team. Something else as well on that is that if you are in a culturally diverse environment and workforce where communication is clear, where work methodologies are clear, there's no friction, for want of a better word, you're going to be happier at work. You are going to be in a psychologically safe environment.
Yeah.
And that ultimately means that people are going to work better. So aside from the diversity bringing more awareness and more creativity and what have you, you've also got an additional layer of improved productivity, because again, research shows if you're happy at work and if you feel safe at work, then you'll do better. And so you're going to get it's a double whammy. It's, you know, a bit of a no-brainer, I think, to have that cultural safety and psychological safety for employees. And it ticks into the well-being side of things. It ticks into the social and governance element as well. And it ticks into the governance element of the social and governance, because with your diversity, you've got an equal opportunities policy in place and you're hiring ethically and responsibly. So it's got lots of tick boxes around it, and there's not really a good reason not to be doing it. Both the cultural intelligence aspect, but the diversity element as well. Unfortunately, whilst this is a fantastic conversation, we have to wrap it up. The bell's ringing. So we've had a great conversation around cross-cultural teams, developing.
We need a part 2 at some point in the future.
We always need a part 2 about everything that we talk about. We've talked about developing cross-cultural communications in teams, having remote, and also what culture looks, how it's developed within companies and what it looks like, and then how they can hire you and to help get them out of that challenge and that funk that they're in. But for now, unfortunately, we have to finish. So thank you, Emma. It's been fabulous. And look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of Look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of the HR and CQ show. We are going to have one more episode where we're answering some of your questions from our most recent Breakfast Bites events. So thanks for joining us on this episode of the HR and CQ show. We have one more episode where we will be discussing some of your questions from the Breakfast Bites events. If you were at the summit, great to see you. If you weren't, I want to see you at the next one.